Hello, everyone. Welcome to the guided newspaper reading session. Today we have something really amazing for you. So let's just look at this article that says how to eat like a Victorian. There's so many things that are going to be wonderful about this article, but let us first understand why is it important for you to do these newspaper readings. So newspaper readings, have a lot of impact on your vocabulary. I always say this right before I begin it. This is a very brief session, a 20 to 25-minute session on reading this newspaper article. This will help you with your reading, with your writing, obviously with your speaking and your listening too. You will learn a lot of new vocabulary words with me in this session. So I want you to have your pen and paper ready, your notebooks ready. We'll just learn so many new words. We'll learn and look at so much new vocabulary, and you will be able to use that a lot for your IELTS preparation. So let's go. I will just paste the link to this article in the chat box. So just give me a second. I'll just send this link on, you know, uh, wait, I'll send this link to you on the YouTube page. So great. Yes, I hope you're able to look at it. Welcome, whoever is watching. Welcome to this session. I welcome you to the newspaper reading sessions. By now, if you've been attending regularly, you know why these sessions are important for you. So let's just look at how to eat like a Victorian. Welcome, Shiva. Welcome to the newspaper reading session. Uh, let's just look at how to eat like a Victorian. So a Victorian would be a person who lived or who was alive during the Victorian age. The Victorian age was in the 1800s in England. Queen Victoria, you must have heard of Queen Victoria. She was the Queen of England in the 1800s. So if you were there in the 1800s in that place, how would you eat? So it's a very interesting article. Let's look at it. Although Victorians faced many public health problems, could it be that they ate more healthily than us? Michael mostly investigates. So a lot of people think that Victorians have very bad diets, but actually that's not true. Or is it true? Let's just look at it. This is the person who did the investigating. Many of us like the fantasy of being a time traveler. So here is a word, fantasy, for you, which is deep imagination. Imagination you have about certain things, that's called a fantasy. Over the last few months, I've been making a series in which a group of volunteers, so a volunteer is a person who offers to help for free. So a volunteer is a person who offers to help you for free, have experienced for themselves something of what their ancestors had to endure. Ancestors, another new word for you. I hope you're writing it all down. Ancestors are the people who came before you. So people who came before you. So like your grandmother, your great grandmother, your great grandfather, they're all your ancestors. Had to endure by living in a reconstructed Victorian slum. So they reconstructed a Victorian slum. You must have heard of slums in Mumbai. So this is about that. Although they had a tough time, none of our volunteers had to put up with the wide range of lethal microbes that killed so many in London's East End in the mid-Victorian period. Nor was their food quite as unpalatable as it would have been, though they were often hungry. So, unpalatable means something that is not very tasty. Unpalatable is another word for you. Unpalatable. Not good tasting. So, food that doesn't taste good, you can use the word unpalatable for it. In the Victorian times, few slum dwellers would have had ovens or cooking utensils. Many didn't even own spoons. Some slum dwellers. Dwellers are people who live in a place. So home dwellers would be a person who lives in a home. A slum dweller would be the person who lives in the slum. Not surprising, they lived mainly on bread, gruel, and broth made up from boiling bones. So bread, gruel is basically like porridge, which we also call dalia in Hindi, right? Not surprisingly, the children of the slums were undernourished, anemic, rickety, and very short. So because they weren't eating very well, the children in the slums were undernourished, not very well nourished. Anemic means they had a deficiency of iron in their body. Rickety is when you have the deficiency of vitamin D in your body. That just means you have rickets. So your bones are not very strong at all. Your bones just bend quite a lot. They're not strong. They're fractured easily. So it means rickety and very short. Of course, they're not going to grow very tall because they haven't had good nutrition. Yes. Now let's look at this paragraph. A study which compared the different heights of Victorian youths. So youths are young people based on their class and their income on British pygmies and giants makes a particularly short reading, a pygmy. A pygmy is a person who is very small. A very small person is called a pygmy. And a giant is, of course, a very tall person. So we have another new word for you to describe a short person, a pygmy, very short person. The study found that young recruits to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, who came largely from middle or upper class background, among the tallest men in the world were at the time averaging almost 5 feet and 9 inches. By contrast, 16-year-old boys from the slums who were recruited by the Marine Society at a charity set up to provide the Navy with a regular supply of manpower were 8.6 inches shorter. So 8 inches shorter, they were like 5 feet 1 inches. So if you were not at the bottom of the heap, then things were quite better, or quite a lot better. So bottom of the heap means you're just at the bottom of society. You're at the bottom of the people who were alive. In some ways, Victorians had healthier diets than we do now because they ate much more nutrient-rich food and consumed far less sugar and processed food. So they ate healthily. They did not eat a lot of sugar. They ate mainly good food, which was good for your body. A typical breakfast might consist of stone ground bread smeared with dripping or lard. So lard is basically made from pig fat, the fat of the pig, and it is healthy because it comes from an animal and it has many monosaturated fats. Accompanied by a large bunch of watercress. Watercress is a type of vegetable, very leafy green vegetable that's rich in vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. There were plenty of cheap seasonal vegetables to be found in the markets, including onions, cabbage, leeks, and carrots and turnips. So cheap means something that's not expensive. Seasonal vegetables in the market, including onions, cabbage, leeks, carrots, and turnips. The main fruits were apples in the winter. So in the winter season, you had apples. In the summer, you had cherries. So you see, there are so many types of things. Yes, not delicious, not eatable. Yes. So I will not be able to see your comments every time. I'll just come back to you, to see what you are typing or what you have written in the chat. Great. The Victorians also ate lots of healthy fiber-rich nuts, such as chestnuts and hazelnuts. So chestnuts, I think you might have looked at chestnuts. I'll just pull up a picture of chestnuts for you. These are chestnuts. You can roast them, peel them, and eat them. They're very, very tasty to eat. The Victorians ate, okay, they often had hazelnuts, which were often roasted and bought from street corner sellers. So a lot of people would be selling them on the street. So that just like in India, we have peanut sellers on the street, they had chestnut and hazelnut sellers. Meat was relatively expensive, though you could buy a sheep's head for about $3, which is £2.50 in modern money. Instead, they ate plenty of omega-3 rich oily fish and seafood. So instead of meat, instead of red meat, they ate lots of seafood and fish, which is good in omega-3 fatty acids, which are very, very good for the development of your body. Herrings are a type of fish. Sprats, eels, oysters, mussels, cockles, and whelks were all popular, as were cod and haddock. So these are shellfish, oysters, mussels, cockles, and whelks. Shellfish, it means they have a shell over their body. Cod is a type of fish. So if you've heard of cod liver oil, that is where it comes from the cod fish. And haddock is also a type of fish. You can see on this image people buying food from carts. So here in India, we also have carts like these where people sell food. And here also in the British times, in the Victorian age, they also sold stuff from their carts. So a person who sells stuff from a cart is called a hawker. What is it called? He's called a hawker. So I'll write another new word for you, a hawker. A person who sells things from a cart is a hawker. According to a study published in the Royal Society of Medicine, how the mid-Victorians worked, ate, and diet, the combination of enormous amounts of physical activity. Most people did physically demanding jobs, which meant they were active for 50 to 60 hours a week. A diet rich in fruits, whole grains, oily fish, and vegetables meant that Victorians suffered less from chronic degenerative diseases than we do. So, degenerative and chronic diseases are diseases we don't have basically a cure for. Dr. Paul Clayton, one of the authors of the study, claims that they were 90% less likely to develop cancer, dementia, and coronary artery diseases that we have today. So, there was much less cancer, there was much less dementia, almost no coronary artery disease, which is basically your heart attacks. It certainly meant that diseases like type 2 diabetes, which plague modern society, were vanishingly rare. So even diabetes was not very, something that they had. Although they ate far more calories than we do, because they were so active, obese Victorians were relatively rare. So, do you know the meaning of obese? Obese is a medical term for being very overweight or fat. So, this is the term for being very overweight or fat. Meaning of Victorians, Kanaya. So, Victorians were the people who were alive when Queen Victoria was ruling. So, Queen Victoria, I hope you know of her, she was a ruler in the 1800s. Uh, and she was the ruler, and everyone who was alive in that time while Queen Victoria was ruling was called a Victorian person. Okay, I hope it's clear to you now. You can let me know in the chat. A Victorian is a person who was living under the time or in the reign of Queen Victoria. Okay, this is clear? Great, great, everyone. Okay, so I have all these words here at the side of the article. You are free to look at it and learn these new words, make them a part of your vocabulary. Although they ate far more calories than we do, they were not as obese. What is the meaning of obese? I've written it here. Very overweight or fat. William Bunting, a Victorian undertaker. An undertaker. What's an undertaker? Have you heard of this word? An undertaker. A person who buries bodies, dead bodies. Wait, I'll write it here. Okay, so an undertaker is a person who buries dead bodies. So William Banting, a Victorian undertaker, was an exception. He was apparently so fat he had to go down the stairs backwards. His family were funeral directors to the royal household and oversaw the funerals of Duke of Wellington, Prince Albert, and Queen Victoria herself. So William Bunting, I told you, a person who buries dead bodies. A funeral is a ceremony that is held to uh, look at or to just invite people to the death ceremony of a person. So he was an undertaker, he buried dead bodies. William Banting, however, is chiefly famous for being the first person to popularize a low carb diet. Carb is carbohydrates. In a booklet he self published in 1863, A Letter on Corpulence, he describes how he lost over 40 pounds, which is 18 kilograms, in just a few months by cutting out foods such as bread, sugar, beer, and potatoes. Despite a contemptuous response. So, contemptuous means to have contempt, and contempt means to not be very happy with someone, to look down upon someone. So, being not very happy with somebody, that's contemptuous. From the medical profession, his modest booklet, modest is not very fancy, just a very simple booklet. So, modest is another word for you. To bant and become a popular term for dieting. To bant means to become or to start dieting. It comes from Banting, which was his surname. One of Banting's descendants, Sir Frederick Banting, would later win the Nobel Prize for pioneering the use of insulin in the treatment of diabetes. So, one of his descendants, people who came after him from his family, he won the Nobel Prize for using insulin to treat diabetes. I hope this is clear so far for everyone. Welcome, everyone, watching the newspaper reading session. We are learning about the diets of the Victorian people. I've written a bunch of words that we came across while reading this article, and you can use them to, enhance your vocabulary to be a better speaker, better writer, a better listener. All of these words, you can use their meaning and just increase your vocabulary. I just want to ask if I'm audible to everyone. Let me know if I'm audible. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Hello. All right, let's look at the modern breakfast. In the early years of the Victorian era, breakfast would have consisted, if you could afford it, of cold meats, cheese, and beer. So, in the early years of Victorian era, not everyone could afford to eat breakfast. People were very poor back then. So they had cold meats. Cold meats are something that you don't need to cook. They are just eatable without cooking. cheese, and beer. In time, this was replaced by porridge, fish, eggs, and bacon. Bacon is a specific cut of pork, so it comes from pigs. Bacon is pork. The full English. So there's a thing called the full English breakfast. We have porridge, fish, eggs, bacon, sausages, etc. By the end of the 19th century, however, this was relatively this relatively healthy start to the day was being challenged by manufacturers of sugary breakfast cereals, pioneered by people like John Harvey Kellogg. So have you heard of Kellogg's cornflakes? I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Kellogg's cornflakes. Who has heard of it? Let me know who knows about Kellogg's cornflakes. A lot of people in India eat it, right? So it comes from the Victorian age. It comes from back then. So in the Victorian age, he first pioneered the sugary breakfast called Kellogg's. Dr. Kellogg had strange views about sex and eugenics, is said to have invented cornflakes as a part of his health regimen to prevent masturbation, a subject he was absolutely obsessed by. He was convinced that replacing meat and eggs with bland foods like cornflakes would reduce excitement and arousal in young men. So he said if you reduce your diet and if you only eat bland food, you won't be so excited sexually. He also recommended a daily enema of yogurt. The Sunday lunch. For many Victorians, Sunday was the only day of rest they would get. A 12-hour, 6 days a week was common. So, they used to work every day till Saturday. They had a lot of vigorous health exercises that they had to do, or, because you're a miner, you're a coal miner, you work in the mines, you do a lot of physical labor as a Victorian. So they had one day of rest, which was Sunday. It was also the only day when they would eat meat. So began the custom of buying a small joint of beef, pork, or mutton to be shared with the family, accompanied by lots of vegetables, potatoes, and gravy. If you couldn't afford a roast joint, then there was always offal, such as liver, tongue, or heart. So there are many cuts of a meat, and some are cheaper. So if you buy the heart or the liver of an animal, it is cheaper than, let's say, a normal cut, such as the leg piece or something like that. This is Queen Victoria. She is described as a glutton and a fast eater. It means she likes to eat quite a lot. A glutton is a person who loves to eat. Uh, he eats a lot. The Victorian era saw the introduction of 2 or 3 course meals, with the courses arriving in sequence one at a time. So a 3 course meal is a meal where you have 3 things. So you have a starter, you have the main dinner, and then you have a dessert or something sweet to eat. So this is what a 3 course meal is. You have 3 things to eat at a meal. Before that, the courses all tend to arrive at once. Queen Victoria, who was something of a glutton, was able to put away 7 courses in less than half an hour. So Queen Victoria could eat 7 things at once in less than half an hour. Since everyone was served after the Queen, and when she had finished, all the plates were cleared, and a good chance that he would be leaving one of her magnificent banquets very hungry. So this was about the food in the Victorian age. Thank you so much for